What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show. Tera Roberts here. We the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. I hope you're all doing fantastic. Hope your rookie drafts are going amazing. Hoping that your best ball drafts, if you're doing any of them, are going very well. I am in the middle of a fun best ball eliminator called FC Eliminator for Fantasy Cares, and my division is full, but there are open divisions if you want to sign up. Hit me up on Twitter if you need the link for it. But yeah, it's super fun. The scoring settings are insane. You get rewarded for actually doing negative things. Like, it's different every year, but this year you're rewarded for doing negative things as well. So like for quarterbacks, it's passing touchdowns are worth 2 points, but interceptions are worth 4. So guess who I drafted in my we're not out of the first round yet because there's 18 teams in the league. So we're still working on the first round. But guess who my first round pick was in that format? So you want a quarterback who is a little bit risky, and you get bonus points for throwing like 40 plus yard. No. There's bonus points for long passes as well. So you need you want to if you can't get like a Josh Allen and you can get the rushing touchdowns and stuff, those are good too. But for guys that don't have that elite ceiling, you don't want to go for like the Jared Goff players. You want to go for the players who are just going to be slinging the ball and getting touchdowns and interceptions. So guess who my first round pick was? It was Trevor Lawrence. And I can safely say that that is the only Trevor Lawrence share that I will have this season. No, I mean, things could turn around for him. I wish him the best this season, but I feel like taking Trevor Lawrence in this type of tournament, bringing me lots of interceptions, bonus points for fumbles too. So Trevor's got me there. So this is going to be very fun. Again, just comment below or hit me up on Twitter or something if you want to know how to sign up for that. But yeah, today let's dive into it. We are talking veteran players that are winners post-draft. So we're looking at sleeper and potential trade targets here for these veteran players. We talked about the rookies last week. We talked about a ton of rookies. There's still technically more that we could talk about, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about the veteran players because they often get left out of all the rookie madness. So we're going to talk about which players got upgrades, which ones won starting jobs via not getting replaced in the draft, and which players just ended up more solidifying or earning bigger roles. So we're starting off at quarterback with my most obvious winner here. It is no shocker. It is Kyler Murray is the big winner here. Biggest winner of the draft, in my opinion, really, Kyler Murray. And just because when we're looking at him and specifically what he needed, nobody needed Drake May, but no existing veteran quarterback needed a wide receiver more than Kyler Murray. We're looking at him. Let's look at his 2029 or 2023 statistics. He was QB9 in average points per game. He didn't suit up until week 10. Obviously, there was some kind of rust to knock off there. We're talking about a guy that spent his entire offseason rehabbing versus bonding with his receiving core. And we're talking about, DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee, Marquise Brown out with an injury. Trey McBride was really only the consistent pass catcher for him. So for him finishing as QB9, despite all of those obstacles, very encouraging, really. I like what I saw out of Kyler Murray in the back half of last year. And with a full offseason, fully recovered, full offseason to bond with his teammates and his brand new shiny weapon, I feel like we're looking at a fantastic bounce back season for him. Despite all of the lack of weapons, Murray still finished in the top 10 for attempts, completions, and average fantasy points per game. Despite coming off of the injury, Kyler wasn't really afraid. No. You can't. Okay. Sorry about that. We had a live podcast interruption. It was my oldest child who is usually a bit more responsible. And he's still standing here listening to me. Usually a bit more responsible. But he didn't have his brush for a shower. And so he came in. I'm like, buddy, you can't get away from the camera. Get away from the camera here. Okay, but we're good now. Diving back into Kyler Murray. Again, despite the lack of weapons, Murray finished in the top 10 for attempts, completion, and average fantasy points per game. And despite coming off of the injury, he wasn't afraid to run, right? He averaged 5.5 carries per game, which is a little bit below his typical average, but it still was an excellent sign. That's very encouraging Yardage was good. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. In fact, those 3 rushing touchdowns came immediately, which was very odd. Right off the bat, we thought we were going to see him kind of ease in, but he came in immediately, not afraid to run the ball, not afraid to run at the goal line. So very encouraging, that confidence that he felt post-injury here. And again, all that considered, I look at that as kind of like a nice baseline for Kyler Murray, what we got out of him last year. Worst case scenario, literally only one weapon, and you still finished as QB9. And he is currently QB9 in Fantasy Pros ECR. He is my QB8. And I don't really see a reality where that changes, because you look at the guys that are stacked ahead of him, they have very solidified positions, and there's not really a lot of ebb and flow that can happen in there unless, Marvin Harrison Jr. just has a 1,000 hype videos, which he will, but 1,000 hype videos that somehow skyrocket Kyler Murray's ADP. I don't know that that's going to happen, just because we're going to have the same thing out of guys like CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. So there's not really a ton of movement in there. It's great value for him, great draft value with his known upside and the ability for Marvin Harrison Jr. to step immediately into that wide receiver 1 role. Then, of course, we've still got Trey McBride. Hopefully we can have some contributions maybe from Michael Wilson, but, we'll see. We'll see. But other than that, man, it's just, I understand where people feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable with Marvin Harrison's ADP, because they're skeptical of what he can actually produce as a rookie. But don't let any kind of skepticism you have about the ADP for Marvin Harrison Jr. affect you in your will to draft Kyler Murray. When we're looking at the type of production that Marvin Harrison Jr. can have in his rookie season, we're asking a lot of him, right? We're asking for him to immediately ascend to a top 12 receiver. I'm asking it too. I've drafted him in multiple best ball drafts, and yeah, it was, early second round, and I'm not shy about that. But anticipated landing spot with Kyler Murray, it was just such a fantastic combination. When you're looking at the fact that this, it can be done. Jamar Chase took 0 time becoming a top 5 receiver, and he had to do that with T. Higgins existing. And while I see, potential for guys like Michael Wilson, it's just, I truly see the connection between Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. manifesting into this fantastic season for Murray to finally return to that elite fantasy status that we have been waiting for. If we're looking at him, his rookie year, right, with Larry Fitzgerald, who we all love Larry Fitzgerald, but that was the end right there, getting on up there in age to retirement. He had Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, finished his QB6. His sophomore season, he had DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk. DeAndre, fantastic, obviously, but again, a little bit teetering towards, your later years. QB3. Kyler Murray's third year was a repeat, but adding in AJ Green and a little bit of Zach Ertz. QB10, but on 14 games. The point is that Kyler Murray has never actually had the opportunity to play with a young elite receiver and grow with him. This is a pairing that he's never seen before. So I think it's going to kind of ignite something within him. Obviously not knocking any of the superstar veterans that he played with, like DeAndre Hopkins, but this is just a new situation that could uncover just another level of Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is still technically a little bit of a buy in Dynasty. He's still buyable. Obviously, he's not cheap like he was last year. Last year, I got him in one league during the rookie draft, traded him for Russell Wilson, a in draft mid, maybe like a 107 or 108 that was Quentin Johnston at the time. So Russell Wilson, Quentin Johnston, and what ended up being the 2024 205 to get Kyler Murray. Absolute bargain. We're not getting those kind of bargains anymore, but you can still get him at a relatively good price because people are still skeptical of the level of commitment that Arizona has to Kyler Murray, but I think they're all in. And this is a team that is going to grow together, him and Marvin Harrison. So excited for that. And also Trey Benson. So they're like, it's youth, right? Just youth just coming into this Arizona team. So I think there's a lot of upside that we can have here. Kyler Murray, huge winner, getting exactly what we needed here. I didn't even notice we had so many comments here. I'm sitting here yapping away, and we have got comments here from the crowd. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's see, we got one here from the Hairy Snowman. Let me show this real quick. Again, if you're listening on the podcast version, always feel free to come in and stop by and watch the live show as well. In the off season, it has been Thursdays at 9 EST. live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook for Player Profiler. But comment from the Harry Snowman, Kyler has had a 4,000 yard ceiling for most of his career. Can he get to the 4,500 Dak Prescott level of passing? I think he can. And with Kyler Murray, I always like to separate him out. And I mean, love Lamar Jackson, obviously. Big, documented stan of him. But I like to separate him out from a guy like Lamar Jackson because they're two very different players in the fact that Kyler Murray is now Lamar can, if you go back to his college time, he was a gunslinger back then. So I think the potential is there. But we're talking NFL. Kyler Murray in the NFL is proven in terms of volume passer, right? In addition to the rushing upside. So when you look at him, I think that 4,500 is realistic, especially if we can get some kind of contribution from it's a lot to ask for Marvin Harrison Jr. in a rookie season. Maybe we're looking at next year for that. But if we can get some kind of level of contribution for one of these other guys to step up, if Michael Wilson can just give us a decent, like a 750 yard season, 800 yard season, you don't have to be fancy, but just give us some volume there combined with Trey McBride. And obviously receptions from running backs has played a major role as well. I think we can get there. I think he's got the capabilities. I like this comment here as well. The floor for Marvin Harrison Jr., 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. It's realistic. I really do. I think it's realistic here. If he stays healthy, sky is the limit here. Type of player that can immediately step in and be that guy, that wide receiver one. Now we're going to talk about next, just a heads up here. We're going to do 2 more quarterbacks. We're going to do Dak as a big winner here in an odd way, but he was a big winner here. But before I dive into Dak, I'm going to do Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as big winners from this draft because you're a big winner if you are, the only 2 quarterbacks on the team with a realistic possibility of starting now. So they are big winners. I'm going to hold off on Dak because I'm going to tie in Dak, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, the backfield as well. Just the way that the draft shaped out. Maybe not the most beneficial for Dallas as a whole in terms of their aspirations from a Super Bowl, but from a fantasy perspective, everyone kind of won for us. So we're going to talk about Dallas as a whole. But before we dive into Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell first, we are going to hear a word from our sponsor.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
All right, let's dive into other big winners at quarterback. Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. It's very basic here. We're not going to talk about this one for a long time. I just wanted to go ahead and get it out the way. The Raiders failed to draft a quarterback. Not really their fault, but now, since they have failed to draft a quarterback, we are in line for Minshew Mania or O'Connell. I couldn't come up with anything clever for not Kevin O'Connell, for Aiden O'Connell. We got to figure out some kind of good, because they're in Vegas. They need some kind of fancy nickname for him if he does win out the starting job. And it's a possibility here. Honestly, I think it could go either way. It's crazy. We thought for sure that we were going to have a 3-way competition here at quarterback for Vegas. The math should have worked out that Vegas would have gotten one of the 6, but Atlanta kind of botched that for them. And Vegas was left holding a Devontae Adams-sized bag. And now either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew is going to have to handle that bag. Not a bad setup, right? Neither one of them is a prolific quarterback, but when you're looking at a receiving core led by Devontae Adams, who is older in age, yes, but still looks fantastic on the field, still should produce at a high level, borderline wide receiver one. You're also looking at Jacoby Myers, who is a fine receiver as well. We've got the addition of Brock Bowers. Oh, poor Michael Mayer. Maybe we see him on the field a little bit, but another fantastic weapon for one of these quarterbacks. So they're not stepping into a bad situation. This is not like, Drake May coming into a situation where he's got to figure it out and make it work, right? Even like looking at Pittsburgh, and you've got a Russell Wilson, and you've got one solid George Pickens, and you've got, hopefully Roman Wilson stepping up as the, wide receiver 2 there. But it's even, it's kind of a, shaky-ish situation. But this is a pretty good situation for either one of these quarterbacks to step into. We know Gardner Minshew, right? We know the baseline for him, the ceiling that he can potentially get to you. And when he has a wide receiver that can get it done, Michael Pittman last year, he's able to be a competent quarterback. Aiden O'Connell is interesting because I do feel like he is still in the race to win here. When we're looking at him, he did show progress as the season went on. He finished 3 of his final 4 games with a minimum of 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So it looked like as the season was going on, he was going through some growing pains, obviously, because as he was not prepping to have any kind of role in this offense heading into the season. So this was different for them. This was different. So when we're looking at this team right here, obviously, either one of these quarterbacks can step in, but the problem is that with depth at quarterback this year, neither one of them is really more than a QB3 for Superflex. So, good value for us. It just speaks to the depth of quarterback that we have here, that we don't have to go reaching and searching for these guys where in past season would be looking at them as like our QB2. No, we've got options here. We've got options. So, but again, these guys, very big winners coming off of this draft. Both of them are going to have the opportunity here to showcase and get it done. We know what we got in Minshew, but maybe O'Connell can, give us a little something here. Comment here regarding Minshew and his, it's not a high, it's a decent contract, but it's not a starter quarter contract. There's no obligation here. Minshew obviously probably in the lead for heading in as QB1, but I wouldn't put it past O'Connell to showcase some kind of progress and really make it competitive. We might end up with a Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask kind of quarterback battle where Gardner does end up, winning out and maybe gives us a little more than we were expecting, kind of like Baker. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, let's talk about a much more interesting quarterback who won here. I told you we were going to kind of save this one because there was a ton to dive into. The Cowboys as a whole, from a fantasy perspective, are just massive winners. So I'm going to dedicate a huge section right here to them, starting off with Dak Prescott, right? And then we're going to lump it together with CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and then Zeke and Rico Dowdle. The Cowboys essentially did nothing that actually changes their offense, right? Letting go of Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard, was a big part of the offense, but not really a massive driver from a fantasy perspective. That was very much so Dak and CD that were putting up those elite numbers, and now they've got a chance to run it back because, Dallas selected offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and it wasn't until round 6 where they got a wide receiver from Southeast Missouri State. I'm not going to lie. I didn't even know that was a school. I didn't even know that. I went to Google to see what conference this team was actually in. And then I felt really bad because it is definitely in the same division as the school that my dad played basketball at Tennessee Tech. So I felt bad. Shout out to you, Ohio Valley Conference. My apologies for not knowing every single one of your teams in there. But I digress. Maybe he, has a chance to step up and contribute, but I don't think he's going to be a significant contributor, unfortunately, within this offense. And it's really just going to continue to be the Dak and CeeDee Lamb show. Looking very similar to what we had at last season, obviously. There is the gaping hole at running back. that will be split between Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, and potentially maybe them trading for someone. There's options. We've heard rumors of Khalil Herbert being on the trade block. We've heard, well, we haven't heard this, but we do know that like Miles Sanders, they really are just one man too deep at running back over there in Carolina, technically, in terms of what's on the roster. So if they can find somebody that has some faith in Miles Sanders and wants to give it a go, maybe we could see him out. But honestly, I don't know that they will make any big, changes within this backfield or any trades because, it's not like Tony Pollard was really having any massive output. And we'll talk about the details with Tony Pollard's output as we kind of dive further into this. But starting off with Dak. Dak led the league last year with 98 attempts inside the 20, with a league leading 24 touchdowns inside the 20, tied with Patrick Mahomes. He was, and there's a very specific reason why I'm pointing out touchdown or these statistics inside the red zone. He was third in attempts inside the 5. He had 8 passing touchdowns inside the 5. Here's the reason why Dak wildly benefited from the lack of investment in a young running back. Pollard struggled at the goal line, and the result of that was that a lot of the touchdowns in the red zone and in the 5 went through Dak and to his receivers. Very beneficial for CeeDee Lamb. We'll dive into his statistics as well, but very beneficial for Dak, because when you're looking at other quarterbacks that had strong attempts and strong passing touchdowns in the red zone, it's guys that their offense just runs aggressively through them, like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Jordan Love. I'm not joking about that. Look it up. The offense just ran aggressively through Jordan Love in the red zone. But then there's also guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Matt Stafford, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy. What is the commonality with all of those guys? They are so successful in terms of fantasy points in the red zone because they throw to guys like Mostert, Achane, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, the prolific receiving running backs. And unfortunately, Dak didn't have that. So when we're looking at that, not so coincidentally, all those guys were all at the top of the list in terms of red zone stats. Even Patrick Mahomes had Jerick McKinnon with the second most receiving touchdowns at running back in the red zone. But Tony Pollard was mysteriously absent, not even close to being at the top of that list. Pollard's production in the red zone was shockingly bad. Kind of disturbing, really, how badly he failed in the red zone. I'm not trying to be rude here, but it wasn't for lack of trying. He had targets in the red zone, 4th most, 0 receiving touchdowns. If we have any kind of uptick in terms of, receptions from a guy like Zeke in the red zone, it's only going to benefit Dak. There is no significant goal line threat that is going to be demanding touches. So let's say they had drafted a Trey Benson. Then you kind of look at that and say, okay, maybe some of those goal line touchdowns from Dak that he was throwing to CeeDee Lamb, maybe some of those are going to transition over to a running back. I don't think we're going to see that now. So the lack of running back investment that they had in the draft, big, big, big benefit for the volume that Dak will continue to see. And again, I'll detail red zone production for the Cowboys backfield, or red zone opportunity for the Cowboys backfield when we talk about Zeke and how it benefits them. But again, we're looking at how this affects Dak as a whole. There is nothing but upside for him. And it feels risky, I know, to think that he's going to repeat that level of success that he had last year. But all signs are pointing towards a complete repeat in terms of the way that he was utilized and the way that they utilized the pass in the red zone, the touchdown opportunities, the volume, all positive here. Dak is QB 8 in Fantasy Pros ECR. He's my QB 7. When you're looking at that, this kind of speaks to, obviously, QB 8 is not a sleeper by any means. But when you're looking at that and the value that he provides, you feel a lot comfortable waiting a little bit for quarterbacks, because you don't have to get the Jalen Hurts. You don't have to get the Patrick Mahomes. I love Lamar Jackson. I don't mind always trying to get Lamar Jackson, but if you miss him, if you can't get him, you don't have to panic, because you've got literally a QB 8 in Dak that could provide massive upside. Looking at CeeDee Lamb there as well. Same exact train of thought here. Looking at my predictions for free agency and the draft for the Cowboys, I was kind of concerned for CeeDee Lamb because I thought Dallas's logical path here would be to sign a reasonably priced running back in free agency and then draft a wide receiver too in a strong draft class. Logic, yep. Nope, Dallas didn't go that. They said, screw that. We're going exactly as we are. And all it takes is for CeeDee Lamb to run it back healthy again. And we could have a guy that is above and beyond the wide receiver one. And it might not even be close. Because when you're looking at his 2023 as a whole, obviously, perfect situation for him. Wide receiver one in overall points, wide receiver two and average points per game in PPR with 23 points. But it's even better than that, really. Arguably, my wide receiver one is Tyreek. But I will think hard over it over the next couple of months because I can see where I flip CeeDee Lamb to that clear wide receiver one now or overall now because of the lack of investment that Dallas made. I could make that switch now, arguably. It's just tough to go away from Tyreek. But when you're looking at CeeDee Lamb's production last year and why it's even better than what he actually finished with as a whole, we know that there was a clear shift in the Cowboys' philosophy after the Cowboys bye week, right? The players were speaking out, even CeeDee Lamb was speaking out, and they were very direct in being clear that they did not feel that the offense was running as it should have been, and that the pass was the focus that it should have been, and that CeeDee Lamb was being properly used. And, to Mike McCarthy's credit, I don't give him a lot of credit, but, as soon as they vocalized and said, hey, man, this is not working, he immediately changed it. They came back from the bye week. And from that point forward after the bye week, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver one in average points per game, averaging 27.8 fantasy points per game in PPR. That is insane. That is insane on another level. Over that time period, the next closest receiver was Tyreek Hill with 21 fantasy points per game. CeeDee Lamb dominated in a way that is kind of inexplicable. And it feels tough to trust that is going to run back exactly as it is. But again, when we were talking about those statistics for Dak and the dominance that he had from a passing perspective in the red zone, CeeDee Lamb was the main beneficiary of that. He had 27 targets inside the 20. He was first in that. It resulted in 7 touchdowns, second only, oddly enough, to Courtland Sutton. Inside the 5, he was tied in terms of targets with Tyreek Hill. He was a massive red zone threat for Dak, and nothing that the Cowboys did indicates they plan to change that in any way, shape, or form. And even if they wanted to, I don't think that they physically can. And I don't think that they want to. It worked very well. The overall offensive production for the Cowboys wasn't really the issue there. So from a fantasy perspective, this is fantastic for us. Again, you just got to look at this Cowboys offense and say, our offensive philosophy was not the issue. CeeDee Lamb plays another full healthy season. The result here, I'm saying if I were the Cowboys looking at the offense, CeeDee Lamb just going to dominate in an insane way. The overall wide receiver one in average points per game. And it might not even be close. It might not even be close, to be quite frankly. But CeeDee Lamb is not the only one who's going to benefit here. Jake Ferguson is a sneaky little beneficiary here. He's one of those guys who is one of your favorite, once you get past that, and I would take Jake Ferguson over David Njoku, just kind of knowing I want to take David Njoku over him, but knowing the issues that he had in terms of connection, specifically with Deshaun Watson, I fear David Njoku might be a bust this year, not due to him in any way, shape, or form, just purely due to Deshaun Watson. But when you're looking at a guy like Jake Ferguson here, he's a massive winner because when we're looking at tight ends that we want to draft, the most tried and true philosophy here is that you want the guy who is obviously you want the guy that's the first look in their offense, like Travis Kelce. But if you can't get that, you want the guy that is the second look in their offense, because once the guys get to being that third look behind a secondary stud wide receiver, you get somebody like Dallas Goedert. And it's just inconsistent and limited target share and kind of frustrating. And he only really thrives when a receiver goes down, right? But Jake Ferguson, since the Cowboys, oddly enough, decided that they didn't want to go out and get another wide receiver. I don't understand it. You could have, I'm not a big Brian Thomas fan, but y'all could have traded up and just like, even if you didn't want to trade up, I mean, there were options there. You could have got yourself Xavier Worthy. You could have got yourself, I mean, maybe Lad McCall. There's so many options that you could have gone with. And to not take one was interesting, but they did need an offensive lineman. So I understand it. But even after that, not drafting one in the second round was peculiar. But Jake Ferguson is a massive beneficiary because he will be the second look in targets in the offense. Again, he will average double-digit fantasy points. He'll average 10, 11. If this offense really picks up, maybe he gets 12 on a high level. But at the very least, we're looking at a very safe 10, and you only got to draft him as the 10th tight end off the board. This is one of my favorite guys to take a little bit late, midish, late-ish, and not really have a significant investment and know that he is not going to absolutely ruin your fantasy season here. So nice. One of my favorite later guys to kind of look at is Jake Ferguson as well. And not a bad trade target in Dynasty too. You're not getting a massive discount there, but I think you can push and kind of swindle a little bit there. And they do appear to be committed-ish to him, right? He's cost effective right now. The Luke Schoonamaker pick was odd and bad. And maybe he comes along in a couple of years, but I don't know that he's going to. I think that Jake Ferguson really has this one locked out. So Jake Ferguson, big beneficiary too. But again, this is like the Cowboys episode here, because Dak didn't just benefit. CeeDee Lamb didn't just benefit. Jake Ferguson didn't just benefit. You know who else benefited? Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, technically, Zeke wasn't signed when the draft happened, but we knew it was coming, right? As the draft kept going and they kept not taking a running back, it all started to make sense, right? That this was going to be Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle's backfield. And from, maybe a little Deuce Vaughn contribution from a tiny receipt. I didn't mean to say tiny, from a minimal receiving perspective there. But I don't see him massively contributing. I do think it'll be Zeke and Rico, and maybe they try to bring someone in. But for right now, we're evaluating this backfield, and big winners here for Zeke and Rico Dowdle. Again, when we're looking at this and whether or not they'll bring in another running back, you look at the production that Tony Pollard had, it wasn't very good. And I do think that the combination of Zeke and Rico Dowdle can put up the numbers that Tony Pollard put up last year. It's not a massive achievement here. Let's start off by understanding the opportunity that exists at running back in this offense, because don't get fooled by the ugliness that is, the prospect of drafting Zeke in your redraft leagues and drafting Rico Dowdle in your redraft leagues. I know it doesn't feel good, but their ADP is not, it's not going to be anything that's going to break the bank for you. And when you understand the opportunity that they have at running back in this offense, then you kind of understand why they're big winners here. The Cowboys passing game was obviously strong, but despite the fact that Dak and CeeDee Lamb dominated in such an insane fashion, the run game, it was very much so involved. They were always competitive. The run was a significant part of their game plan. Tony Pollard just kind of failed, unfortunately. Pollard had the 7th most attempts in the league. This offense, they weren't abandoning the run at any time. If you ever felt like it was a high-flying offense that the running back didn't get opportunity, he got opportunity. In terms of yards per carry, unfortunately, it was just 4 yards per carry. His receptions, yards per carry, his statistics were oddly enough wildly similar to that of Joe Mixon. Nearly identical, really, in one little small area. Touchdowns. I've talked ad nauseum about my issues with Joe Mixon and his efficiency, but what saves Joe Mixon is that he can produce touchdowns, right? He will not fail miserably at the goal line, and unfortunately, Pollard did. So that's the big separator there, that a running back in that offense can produce similar value to a guy like Joe Mixon, and you don't have to be particularly good in terms of yards per carry. I can see either one of these running backs for Dallas averaging less than 4 yards per carry and still putting up decent fantasy numbers, because the opportunity here is in the red zone and in receptions as well. In 2023, Pollard had the second most attempts inside the 20 at running back, behind only Christian McCaffrey. Of the 5 running backs that had more than 50 carries inside the 20, Pollard had the fewest touchdowns with 4. The next fewest was Joe Mixon with 8. Pollard was just wildly unproductive in the red zone. Inside the 5, he had 16 attempts, and those resulted in just 2 touchdowns. Again, that's a very high number, very low efficiency. Kyren Williams, in contrast, like for comparison there, Kyren Williams and David Montgomery had 17 carries inside the 20. So Pollard had 16, Kyren Williams and David Montgomery had 17 carries inside the 5. That resulted in 9 and 8 touchdowns, respectively, for Kyren Williams and David Montgomery. The result for Tony Pollard, again, was just 2. Like, it just struggled so badly. And not to knock Pollard massively, because it's a very good chance that that could have been injury related. That could have really been the issue there, that he was just kind of recovering from that injury and didn't really feel like himself. But it also might have been that 3-down back workload just wasn't sustainable for Pollard. But this is not about Tony Pollard. This is about the opportunity for the running backs in the Cowboys backfield. At this point, it doesn't really matter who it is. You will have the opportunities to produce. All you got to do is fall into the end zone. All you got to do is catch the passes, right? You don't have to be prolific. You just have to be mildly productive with the massive opportunities that you got there. Again, plenty of attempts, elite red zone opportunity. Dak is more than happy to incorporate running backs in the receiving game as well. This is a fantastic opportunity. Do not expect greatness, because Zeke looked awful last year. He looked terrible. But to be fair, Ramondre Stevens well. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, Zeke wasn't fantastic, but that might have been a combination of the New England offense having some issues, right? Things could look a little bit different in Dallas. And honestly, Zeke could look very similar to the running back that he was in his last year with Dallas. Not efficient, no burst. That's fine. Just fall into the end zone and give us low end RB2 upside. That's all you can ask for. And that is plenty valuable at the very, very low ADP that you will be getting either one of these guys at, because no one is rushing to the bank to get either one of them, right? Let's move on to, let's stay on the running back track here and talk about some running back winners. And this is going to be a 2-part episode. I already see this now, because I got a massive list. And I kind of knew this heading in here, that there was no way that we were going to be able to get through all of these. So we're going to get through a few more running backs. Jesus Christ. We're going to talk about Isaiah Pacheco. We're going to talk about Joe Mixon. We're going to talk about Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, Zamir White, Zach Moss, and Chase Brown. I don't know if, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins as well. I don't know if we can actually get through all of those in this episode. And I got to keep it to an hour. So we're going to have to do more than likely a part 2. But let's just go ahead and dive right into these running backs right here. So we talked about Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle being big winners. But the big winner right here, it's Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco, the man, escaped free agency unscathed. He escaped the draft unscathed. How's that for the never trust a day 3 running back, crowd people? How's that? We got to trust this one. We're trusting Isaiah Pacheco. Good for him. Technically, Jerick McKinnon could still re-sign, but as of now, Pacheco is one of the few running backs this offseason that had everything worked out 100% in his favor. McKinnon moving on. CEH re-signing is excellent for him because we don't get any surprises, right? You get a new backup coming in there and maybe they, show a little bit more, maybe they earn a little bit more, get a more regular role, taken away a little bit from Pacheco, but we know what we're getting out of CEH. He's not there to have any massive kind of contribution. This is Isaiah Pacheco's backfield. Thank you. Yes. Thank you to my one Isaiah Pacheco Dynasty share. Thank you. We saw a fantastic little uptick in usage through the air in 2023 for Pacheco. That is what we needed to see there. That is what we needed to see. He had 44 receptions on 49 targets, not bad on 14 games. And that was let's see. That was, 14 games. And after week 12, he had a minimum of 4 targets in each game that he played. Things got a little bit better as the season went on. And that is the dream for us. We need to see him involved in the receiving game because Patrick Mahomes is a touchdown hog. So the reality of Isaiah Pacheco ever becoming a 12 touchdown guy, that's just not going to happen because Patrick Mahomes just likes to call his number at once he gets in the red zone, right? The touchdowns are coming via his hand in the red zone, and it just is what it is, right? You get goal line opportunities, but they just don't come as frequently for an offense that produces as much as Kansas City does because Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And that's okay. That's all right. It's what makes him, it makes it hard for him to be a solidified top 10 back. But when we're looking at him last year, he was RB 14 in PPR and average points per game. That's a very reasonable floor for him. And consistent receiving work with Jerick McKinnon gone can get him to a RB1. The only thing is that he is kind of being drafted there. So he's not exactly a value pick, but he is a big winner here. And I predict him to be one of the more reliable backs in 2024. Not the guy with the massive ceiling, but if you're, structuring your fantasy lineup or your team in a way that you want to have someone that you can rely on to get you a guaranteed, 10 fantasy points and have a decent ceiling and someone that you don't have to worry about, I think that Isaiah Pacheco is that guy. Moving on to another big winner here. Joe Mixon was a big winner from this draft as well. Death, taxes, and Joe Mixon. I admit I'm not the biggest fan of Mixon's play. Just because I feel like if he were playing in a subpar offense, right, with his efficiency issues, I talked about it a little bit before. If he was playing in a subpar offense, his production, I think, would look a little bit more like Chuba Hubbard. But hey, he's had the luxury of playing with high-end quarterbacks and superstar wide receivers, so it doesn't really matter for him. That is his career. His yards per carry, it doesn't matter if it's just 4 because he is a volume back that gets goal line carries. He is successful at the goal line, and he gets a lot of receiving work. He is a true 3-down back, and that is not changing. And he has no competition. Big beneficiary from this draft because it's possible that if, the Texans wanted to kind of make a later investment, not spend obviously a decent draft pick, but they could have looked for somebody to maybe work in combination with Joe Mixon, but they didn't do that. And I have tried to predict the thinning out of volume for Mixon multiple times, and it never pans out. And this year, I'm not going to be doing it because there's literally no one that can take that volume away. If he had stayed in Cincinnati, I do think that Chase Brown would have cut in. But in Houston, Singletary gone, just Dameon Pierce left, who the Texans, straight up phased out of the offense last year. Mixon is king now, and no one will be challenging him. I don't think this is a Mixon top 5 season, so keep that in mind. But his ADP doesn't reflect that, so that's okay. Because, again, we're looking at the receivers' receiving stats for the Texans last year. They lean heavily into their receivers. They don't have a ton of dump offs. Running backs obviously do get targets, but they're not massively involved. They had the second lowest percentage of targets to running backs in the league. And with the addition of Stephon Diggs, I don't see where that gets any better. But that's fine because the goal line opportunities will be there. So again, we're looking at Joe Mixon, just a fine high-end RB2 with RB1 upside on a weekly basis in games where he could get multiple touchdowns. So big winner from this draft here for Joe Mixon. Another big winner from the draft, surprise, surprise, Aaron Jones walked away unscathed, walked away from Green Bay to Minnesota on just a 1-year deal. And Minnesota did not investment at running back. That one was a little peculiar to me. I was kind of shocked, to be quite frank, that they didn't take some kind of running back in this draft, a bigger back in this draft, because it is Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, and nobody else. Nobody else that has ever contributed to Minnesota specifically. Obviously, Myles Gaskin is on there, and that magic is clearly gone, but It's just Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler there in Minnesota. I thought that they would add a bigger body back because Jones and Chandler they're similar. They're very similar, smaller backs, and it's just a weird combination. But I think that kind of bodes well for Aaron Jones because when we look at him, obviously, volume in terms of massive volume has never really been the thing for him. He's typically a guy that's topped out in the low 200s in terms of carries in a single season. And at his age, it's kind of tough to expect that he's going to have a massive outlier year. Ty Chandler's even slimmer than Aaron Jones with no history of significant volume. Kevin O'Connell's offense, again, doesn't really throw to running backs a ton either. They had, I don't know if they were dead last or wait. I think they were third to last in terms of targets to running backs. So the big deal here is that Minnesota not drafting a running back does mean that I envision Aaron Jones primarily serving as an early down back in this offense because he does have strength at the goal line. He does have the capabilities of being early down back, and maybe Ty Chandler is in there spelling him so they don't overwork him though. I'm skeptical of it in terms of if this was the right direction for them, but it is what it is. This is the direction that they chose to go. I don't particularly agree with it in terms of how that's going to work out for their offense, but hey, it's going to work out for Aaron Jones, and he is a big winner here if he can handle a decent amount of volume. I personally would like his ADP to come down a little bit for me to feel comfortable with him. Right now, he's RB18 in Fantasy Pros ECR. Maybe that changes a little as we start to get some players more solidified. Maybe we see a massive jump from Jonathan Brooks if he heads in the training camp healthy and, clear RB1. Maybe Zamir White makes a big jump. I think there's still some guys that could maybe push him a little bit further back because Aaron Jones is RB23 for me, just because, again, the volume concerns there and the potential lack of receptions in that offense. But fantastic news for him and them not investing in a bigger back than giving those goal line opportunities for him. All right, moving on to one more running. Now we'll do two more running backs here. And I am going to show this comment here from Famous Jay, who is, let's see, what's up? And he says he's going to be catching the fantasy analysis here on the replay. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. And then we do one more comment here from JMZ555. Thoughts on Josh Jacobs? That's a good question. He is not on my winners list just because I do think that there's enough. I don't think you can consider him a winner with them drafting Marshawn Lloyd, but I am not of the opinion that this is a significant threat to him. I think a lot of people are looking at Marshawn Lloyd and feeling like he is going to play a significant role in potentially play a significant role in this offense and maybe, be the running back of the future, and they can get out of Jacobs' deal after 1 year. And technically that this is, a bad situation for Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd being drafted. I'm not of that opinion. And the reason for that, maybe I'm a bit biased. I think half of it is fantasy analysts, and maybe you could say I'm a bit biased as a Packers fan, but I have seen them take running backs as high as, AJ Dillon as high as in the second and never actually ascend to an RB1 role. So I don't feel like the draft capital investment there raises any red flags because it's not going to immediately push him up. And when I'm looking at Josh Jacobs, and the reason I actually like Josh Jacobs this year, and the reason that I like Josh Jacobs this year is kind of similar to what we've seen before with running backs. When you have running backs, and I understand Jacobs was, wildly underperformed last year in terms of all his statistics were down, obviously dealt with an injury. But I feel like that is being overblown, and I don't think it's shocking that that happened. I feel like we should have kind of seen that one coming. When running backs come off of those big outlier years when they have an ungodly amount of carries, and Jacobs had a ridiculous amount of carries. We've seen it happen with Christian McCaffrey. We saw it happen with Derrick Henry, where he had just a massive year and then came off and had the injury. Christian McCaffrey, after his RB1 overall season, suffered an injury. It's not uncommon for these running backs to have these massive years and then have a fall off in the next year because their body was beat up from that extreme level of volume. So I would not be shocked if we see actually a resurgence of Josh Jacobs this year. So I like Josh Jacobs this year. I don't feel like the Marshawn Lloyd draft is an immediate threat for this year. And if someone is, and honestly, that could make him a decent buy in Dynasty because he is still relatively young. And if someone is panicked because there's a lot of noise and fodder going around about how the Packers maybe aren't as invested in Josh Jacobs as they appear to be, I don't mind Josh Jacobs as a potential buy low option while people are panicking because I do anticipate him having a nice bounce back season, especially in an offense like the Packers offense that, again, is going to present a ton of goal line opportunities, and he will be that guy. So I like Josh Jacobs this year. Good question. Let's do one more question as well here from Franz. Would you send the 201 in a 10-team tiered PPR Superflex for Kirk Cousins? Oh, God, that's a good question. 10-team. I think I would do it. Yeah, it's fine. 10-team makes it a little... 10-team leagues, I know, because I play in a 10-team Superflex league, and you always got to be careful because you're thinking about the 201 and it really being what the, 111. So that's fine. I think it's fine in Superflex for Kirk Cousins because it's a nice little discount here. Kirk is a little older, but I think it's a reasonable late first round pick. I think is a reasonable price for a guy that is heading into an offense where it'll be, very similar to the offense that he was last year. So we've got another offshoot of the Sean McVay system. More weapons than anybody could ask for. We've actually got Drake London. And when we get to the wide receiver winners, which I don't think we're going to get to in this episode, but Drake London and Darnell Mooney are two of my big draft winners as well. So yeah, I'm okay with that. I know it probably feels a bit yucky because of coming off the Achilles and whatnot, but I think that's fine value for him. It's not like when we're looking at him coming off the Achilles, it's not like he was a highly mobile quarterback anyway. So not a massive concern there. I think that's a reasonable price for the potential upside that we get there. Got to remember that Kirk Cousins, aside from that injury, there's not a big injury history with him. Always been very reliable, very healthy, was coming off a career pace season last year before the injury. So I'm very encouraged by it. I think we can get through maybe two more running back big winners here. Ramondre Stevenson. This will be quick. Ramondre Stevenson, big winner in the draft here because New England has always drafted a running back, right? To come in and kind of sit there and lurk in the shadows here. And yay, they didn't. Fantastic news. Antonio Gibson being signed in free agency was a bit of a bummer there because receptions have been the best path to fantasy relevancy in the New England backfield over the past couple of years. But we know that because, Ramondre Stevenson's best season was when he had a whopping 69 receptions and very minimal rushing touchdowns. So the path there is, in fact, receptions. So Gibson cutting into receiving work, not fantastic. But I do think the draft brought some good news for Stevenson. Again, not obviously drafting a running back is fantastic. So we're looking at hopefully the majority of, Gibson is capable of, handling goal line work. But I do think that they'll lean into Ramondre Stevenson at the goal line here. And goal line opportunities have not been plentiful for the Patriots offense because they've been struggling as a whole. But hey, we've got the addition of Drake May, who I feel very confident in the potential of these young wide receivers here. So I do think that things will begin to turn around for Ramondre Stevenson, and we can have a better season than we got out of him last year. His ADP is fairly reasonable here, and New England not doing the whole Bill Belichick thing and continuously drafting running backs to replace running backs every single year. We didn't get that, so yay, Ramondre Stevenson, big winner here. And you know what? Let's get through. Yeah, let's get through the running backs as a whole, and then we'll do the wide receivers in the next episode. Zamir White, another big, big, obvious winner here. I know some people want to talk Dylan Lobb into a nice sleeper pick. And I'm not adverse to that in Dynasty. I'm not. It's not a massive investment that you've got to, what is it? I think his ADP is a 4th round here. I think it's 4th round right now still. In deep redraft leagues, fine as a late handcuff in deep redraft leagues. If you want to say that maybe Alexander Madison's failure in Minnesota repeats in Vegas. But realistically, I don't really see Lobb's pick as being a big threat to Zamir White. I believe that he escaped as unscathed, next to unscathed as possible, other than a guy like Isaiah Pacheco. When they signed Alexander Madison, I was like, great, that's a fantastic sign because Alexander Madison is not going to challenge Zamir White. We saw the result of that last year. And them signing a 6th round, smaller running back, potentially pass catching running back here. Not a massive threat as well. Because when you look at this Raiders backfield, obviously we've got a new offensive coordinator in Luke Getsy, but the Raiders as a whole typically haven't asked for a ton of receiving work from their running backs. And it'll be interesting to see what Luke Getsy's true vision is because, I do think he might have had some limitations there trying to make things work with Justin Fields and then running more of a hodgepodge backfield. So having Zamir White as a very solidified guy right here who is very 3-down capable. Remember, Zamir White is a 3-down back. He's not a flashy receiving running back, but he is very competent in the receiving game. So early down work, 3rd down work, he's fine at blocking, goal line work. He's a complete back, and that was the appeal of him as a prospect heading into the NFL. And I think we're finally getting that realization of him. I think he's got the clear edge here at the goal line and lead back work, and neither quarterback is going to be looking to throw a massive amount, so it's going to be a very balanced offense. And the Raiders defense was turning things around towards the end of the season. So I don't think that they'll be in a situation where they'll just be giving away, massive games anymore. And games should be mildly-ish competitive to where they don't have to abandon the run. So a little bit more goal line opportunity there. And then any receiving work on top of that is just icing on the cake. Zamir White, big winner, super excited for him heading into the season. And then obviously in Cincinnati, we talked about the exit of Joe Mixon, and with the exit of Joe Mixon and Cincinnati not investing in a running back in the draft, we have Zach Moss and Chase Brown as big winners here. Either one is going to get to be the heir apparent to Joe Mixon. We talked about Joe Mixon and, the efficiency troubles that he's had, right? But when you're looking at Joe Mixon's work as a whole, efficiency and consistency issues aside, despite those issues, he has produced top 10 fantasy seasons in total points for the past 3 years with over 3,000 total rushing yards, 29 rushing touchdowns. The receiving work, I didn't even count that up because it's just, we know he is one of the, I'm going to say luckiest, but I mean, he just, receiving work for him has been his bread and butter within that Cincinnati offense, always helping him carry over that edge, the goal line opportunities, all of that as a whole. If Zach Moss or Chase Brown can separate as the RB1, they would be an absolute steal at their ADPs, and they can rise up a little bit. Obviously, if one's going to rise a little bit, it will be Zach Moss, just because we've got that nice recency bias of him coming off of that season where he put up RB1 numbers in Jonathan Taylor's absence. And, he eventually got down to the backup role as, the second half of the season went on. But he was putting up fantastic numbers in relief of Jonathan Taylor, showcasing that he can handle workload, can handle the RB1 role, can handle being a 3-down back. So I do think that he is the leader when we're heading into the season, but I do think that this backfield can be a little bit more ambiguous than we were expecting, maybe, right? Chase Brown, when we're looking at him last year, I think I drafted Chase Brown in all my dynasty leagues in the 4th round because I was so optimistic of the possibility there, just because of my feelings about Joe Mixon. But he failed to really see the field in the first half of the season. He was dealing with an injury as well. But once he came back, the Bengals really increased his role, got him involved in the receiving game, got him some work on the ground as well. And he just kind of thrived, especially through the air. And this is really critical, right? Because we talk about Joe Mixon and the value that his receptions really provided him from a fantasy perspective. When I'm looking at that backfield, obviously I want one of them to step up either way. But if it's going to be kind of ambiguous, I want the one at the lower ADP and the one that has the receiving work. And that's kind of panning out to be Chase Brown. So again, I like Chase Brown. ADP is a little for me in terms of, neither one of these backs really pulling away right here. Like to see some separation for them. But I think they're both big beneficiaries here. They both could have, strong claims to the RB1 role here. Split work is going to be a little bit frustrating, but if one of them can pull away here, fantastic opportunity for them. So both of them coming off big winners here. Cincinnati keeping it cheap here in the backfield, low value investment, which is good. Hey, it's good for both of them as well, because we're looking at this, offense moving forward. They've potentially got to look at replacing. Obviously, they drafted Jermaine Burton, but potentially for signing free agents in terms of looking at T. Higgins leaving potentially next year. So investment at running back, long term here. Taking stabs at Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Kind of taking a predictive little stab here in terms of either one of them separating themselves. And then we will do one more set of winners here. And let's just say it. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins are winners. I know this may not be a popular opinion here. I get it. Because I do like the potential. I'm not, this is not a knock on the Dynasty sleeper darling, Kamani Vidal. He obviously, you're going to recommend him and be 100% on board with drafting him because there's the chance there, right? There's a chance that he can ascend to an RB1 role there in that Chargers run heavy offense. They've made no secret the fact that this team is going to be run heavy. They made the statement when they bypassed Malik Neighbors and took Joe Alt in the draft. So I'm 100% on board with taking that dart throw, and not even a dart throw, just that chance with Kamani Vidal. He's not a steal anymore, though, right? He's not a steal in Dynasty. You have to pay up to get him because everybody's trying to up and draft him ahead of time to grab him. But when we are looking at the Chargers and what we were expecting them to do in this draft, we were expecting them to draft Blake Corum, right? We were expecting them to maybe look at Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson. We were thinking they're going to get one of the top guys, right? They're going to make a massive investment at running back, and they didn't. Waiting until the 6th round to grab a running back is a big win for Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, whether you like them or not, because it does say that they felt comfortable. They feel comfortable with, at the very least, Gus Edwards heading into the season. I think that's the key there. Gus Edwards, really. We'll talk about J.K. Dobbins in a second, but when we're looking at Gus Edwards, I feel like maybe his age is a bit deceiving, right? 29, but he's been in the league the same years as Saquon Barkley, and he has far less mileage on him. When we look at Gus Edwards, we can't look at him as kind of an aging veteran. We need to look within the context of his capabilities rather than someone that could be hitting a cliff, because theoretically, in terms of volume, that's just not the case with him. He seems to be more so on that Raheem Mostert track in terms of being able to extend your longevity into your 30s because you did not have a massive workload early in your career. So at 29, you can still technically be in your prime. And I do think that it's Gus Edwards who is the massive winner here, who has the first rights to being the early down back here, because we know exactly what we get out of Gus Edwards. We know he is a strong early down back. We know he will win at the goal line behind a good offensive line. And we know that he will absolutely not contribute on third downs. That's not going to happen. But we know exactly what he is. And within the context of the Chargers offense and where he is in terms of his ADP, that's a win. That's a strong guy that you can look at if you're a 0 RB drafter in redraft. This is somebody who I will or hero RB drafter. I think I'm taking more of a hero RB approach in 2024. I'll be doing some mock drafts over the next couple of weeks. So I'll share that as I'm doing mock drafts with you guys. But when we're looking at Gus Edwards, big winner here in terms of the opportunity that he has here. J.K. Dobbins, I think he's a winner because he is an obvious wild card, obviously, coming off of that significant injury that often kills running backs. And technically, he's literally only played one full season, but it is a great sign that they didn't make that investment. So the confidence that they have in Gus Edwards, and it's not the confidence that they have in Dobbins. I don't think this showcases confidence in Dobbins, but it means that he has the opportunity and he doesn't have a massive uphill battle to beat anyone out. He has to contend with a 6th-round rookie and Gus Edwards, who has a known role in an offense that wants to be run heavy. So he will have, if he is healthy and can beat his own injuries, the ability to immediately step on the field and contribute. So this is a fantastic sign for him. Not that the confidence level is super high with Jim Harbaugh, but that he will have the opportunity and won't have to, go through like a James Robinson thing where you're trying to, justify yourself on the field. I think he'll get the opportunity. So we're going to wrap it up there because we're right at a little bit over an hour here. And we got wide receivers to go. I'll tip you guys off. So make sure you come back here next week. I don't think we have any, I should probably double check, but I don't think we have any reason to not be here at the same time next week. But we're going to talk about Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, who, spoiler alert, I will be drafting just the stupidest amount of him late rounds because Darnell Mooney truther and big winner because he can be the wide receiver 2 for Minnesota. Yay, Darnell Mooney. So happy for him. We're talking about Garrett Wilson, big winner. We'll be talking about my boy Jameson Williams, and I'm ready to fight y'all on that one because I know that people are not into the idea of Jameson Williams ascending to this wide receiver 2 role, and I'm 100% on board with it, and I will explain to you why he is a big winner for me and why I'm not delusional. We'll also be talking about, we already talked about CeeDee Lamb, but we'll talk about the New Orleans offense and the benefit for, somewhat benefit for Chris Olave, but really big benefit for Rashid Shaheed, Terry McLaurin, Demarcus Robinson for another deeper sleeper there, really benefit. I know it seems weird, but that one is one that I really want to call attention to, just so we can walk through his stats from last year and understand why Demarcus Robinson is a deeper later round pick that we need to be putting on our rosters for sure. And then we'll talk tight ends as well. We didn't get to talk about any tight ends other than Jake Ferguson, but we can talk about Pat Freiermuth, winner. I think, in my opinion, Dalton Kincaid, winner, and Evan Ingram, winner. Hear why. I might have talked about a little bit that when we were talking about Brian Thomas in the rookie show, but we'll talk about Evan Ingram as well here. So there's lots to talk about next week. We will be doing, we'll commit to a part 2 on this because we've got a lot more that we can talk about in terms of veterans that won post-draft and secured their roles, their upside for our fantasy season, guys that we should feel confident in investing in 2024. But that wraps things up. I appreciate you all joining in. I appreciate the comments, the live comments here. I always appreciate all of y'all coming back week after week. Fantastic. Shout out to Fabian Patch there. Shout out to the Harry Snowman. Shout out to Famous J. Shout out to Big Shy. Am I missing Frankie Basquio and Franz? And JMZ55. Thank you guys all for tuning in, and everyone else that tuned in and didn't watch. Appreciate you watching as well. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video, drop me a comment if you want. Make sure that you're subscribed to Player Profiler as well. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel at It's Sarah Time. I'll be dropping some of the sleeper information on there as time permits. Sometimes I get a little bit behind, but we're going to be pushing forward. If you're listening on the podcast version, make sure that you're subscribed. That would be greatly appreciated as well to the Dear Miss Fantasy feed. That would be fantastic. Outside of that, I will catch you again next week. Appreciate you all joining in. It has been absolutely wonderful as always. Have a fantastic week.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.